Okay, now we're going to do part 2 of the notes on factoring. So part 1 was when C is positive. Part 2 we're going to take a look at when C is negative. So when our C value here is negative. So when that is the case, we want to subtract to equal B and multiply to equal C. So the difference from what we just learned is that B value we are going to subtract. So when we have x squared plus bx minus c, we are going to have x plus the bigger number times x minus the smaller number. And if we have x squared minus bx minus c, we are going to have x minus the bigger number times x plus the smaller number. So when we look at this, we are going to note that we are going to have one parentheses with a positive plus one with a negative for both those situations. So let's do the examples. Okay, so what we have to look at first when we do the examples is what are my C. So my C is plus and my B is plus. So I know I'm going to have x plus times x plus. So now we have to figure the numbers. So we're finding the factors of 6. And we're saying which factors add to equal 5, 2, and 3. So we can put those in. All right, next example, we have minus b and positive 6. So I'm going to have x minus and x minus in my parentheses. So we're going to have the factors of 6 multiplied to equal c. So multiply to 6, and they have to add to equal 5. So I have 2 and 3 again, 2 and 3. Okay, next example, I have positive b and minus 6. So I know I am going to have x plus the big number times x minus the small number. So I like to set up my parentheses first. I think it helps me stay organized when I'm factoring a problem. So I'm looking for the factors of 6. And now they have to subtract to equal b. Okay, so they have to subtract, in this example. So if I have 3 minus 2, that equals 1, right? And that is b. So, right, b here is 1. So I'm going to put the big number first, 3, and the small number second, 2. Okay, last example here, C, we have minus and a minus. So that means I'm going to have x minus the big number times x plus the small number in my parentheses. Looking for factors of 6. And they have to subtract to equal b. So same as the last example. So 3 minus 2, right, equals 1. So now I'm going to have x minus 3 times x plus 2 in the parentheses. All right, I'm going to continue going through these next examples. And always feel free to pause and take a look at the work again, just to let it sink in as I go through these examples. All right, so the first thing I do is I look at the signs and I have a -2. So a negative C. So that means I'm going to have x plus the big number times x minus the small. So now I have to find my factors of 2. So 2 times 1 is all there is. And they will subtract to equal b, which b is 1. So 2 minus 1 equals to 1. So I know those are my numbers I want to use. So I'm going to do x plus 2 because that's the larger number, and x minus 1 is the smaller number. Okay, we have a plus and a minus here, so I'm going to do x plus the big number, x minus the small. So we're looking for factors of 12. And they have to subtract to equal b, right? So subtract to equal 4. So 6 minus 2 equals 4. So I'm going to use those numbers. So I'm going to have x plus 6 times x minus 2. So this is what I'm looking for. This is a factor. Now this is a concept that you're going to use in geometry. So this is an important concept as we close out the school year here. All right, look at my signs again. So I'm going to have x plus the big, times x minus the small. Looking for factors of 24. 3 and 8. 4 and 6. All right? So I'm looking for factors of 24 that subtract to equal b. So b is 2. So 6 minus 4 equals 2. So I know I'm going to use these numbers. I'm going to put the bigger number first with the plus sign and the smaller number with the minus sign. Okay, so for D, I have a minus and a minus. So I'm going to have x minus the big number times x plus the small. So I'm looking for factors of 2 that subtract to equal 1. So 2 and 1. Okay, we have minus and minus. So I have x minus the big factor times x plus the small number, the small factor. So we're looking for factors of 56. And as you practice, you don't have to write them all out if you can figure out the factors first. So if I have the factors 7 and 8, right, and I'm looking to subtract to equal b, which b is 1. If I take 8 minus 7, that gives me 1. So those are my factors. So I'm going to have x minus 8 times x plus 7. Okay, minus and minus. So I'm going to have x minus the big number, x plus the small. So I'm looking for factors of 16 that subtract to equal 6. So I have 8 and 2. So x minus 8 times x plus 2. Now as you're doing these, you can always check. So we have x squared plus 2x minus 8x minus 16. Combine like terms. And we can see that we get to the same, right, equation as the original. So my answer checks. All right, so we're going to have x plus the big times x minus the small number. We're looking for factors of 75 that subtract to equal 10. All right, so if we have, so we have 5 and 15. So we have x plus 15 times x minus 5. So here we're going to have x plus the big times x minus the small. This part down here that I'm writing is really just to help me make sure I put the factor in the right location. That's not part of the actual answer, but that's how I keep track of what number needs to go in which parentheses. All right, so we're looking for factors of 54 that are going to subtract to equal 3. So let's see, 54 divided by, that's not, so we have, of course, we have 1 and 54. We have 3 and 18. And we have 6 and 9. So 9 minus 6 is 3. So I can plug my numbers in. So this, here's the answer we're looking for. Okay, last example. We're going to have x plus the big times x minus the small. And we have 10 and 9. So there are our factors. Okay, so when you're doing your homework, this box here on notes A, or I'm sorry, the first part of notes B and this part, right? That's what I would use to reference as you're doing your work.